It had only been recently that local groundskeeper, George Tuscan, started to notice a cat hanging around a particular grave. Wanting to keep the graveyard pristine, he had tried everything, but no matter what he did, the cat would always come back. Something didn't feel right, so George decided to call the police, hoping it was nothing aside from a strange cat's behavior. However, when the police started investigating the grave, they discovered something no one could have ever expected. George had been hacking away at one of the few overgrown bushes on the property when he first saw it, a brown tabby cat walking over the premises. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. At first, he thought nothing of it, thinking it was simply passing through, but he would think differently when he started to see it every other day. George had been casually roaming around the grounds to see if all the graves were in pristine condition when he saw it, the brown tabby cat lying atop one of the graves. "What the hell?" he said, frowning at the sight. He crouched down, approaching the animal at eye level, but couldn't see a collar. Could its owner have passed, and maybe this was his burial place? George didn't even have to walk back to find out this information, as the date on the grave told him enough. There was no way in hell that this cat belonged to the person lying here, as this grave had been much older than 10 to 15 years. Though it wasn't a kitten, it also wasn't a senior cat, as George had seen how it used its agility to move from one place to another. He tried to usher it away, softly pushing it, but the cat only meowed, annoyed at him. With a heavy sigh, George finally decides to call the police. He dials, his fingers shaky. "There's this cat, see? Keeps coming back to a particular grave," he starts, trying to sound more convinced than he feels. The line goes quiet for a moment, then, "Sir, are you suggesting we investigate a cat?" The voice on the other end sounds amused, not taking George's concerns seriously at all. "Look, it's probably nothing," the dispatcher continues, clearly trying to wrap up the call. "Cats like to wander, you know. I wouldn't worry about it." George can feel the dismissal in their tone, like he's bothering them over nothing. Frustration bubbles up inside him, but he thanks the dispatcher and hangs up, feeling defeated. George paces back and forth, mulling over his next steps. It's just a cat, after all, isn't it? Shaking his head, George decides that maybe calling the police was a step too far. Perhaps there's another way to handle this. Determined to resolve the issue, George decides to call animal control instead. "There's a cat here that refuses to leave, keeps hanging around one of the graves," he explains over the phone. The response is more positive this time, with a promise that someone will come out to take a look. George hangs up, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe this will be the end of it. Soon enough, a van pulls up, and two officers step out, equipped with cages and nets. They follow George to the grave, but the cat seems to sense them coming. With an agility that surprises everyone, it darts away, dodging every attempt at capture. George stands there watching the spot where the cat vanished. Standing alone as the van drives away, George's determination only grows. The failed attempt hasn't discouraged him. If anything, it deepens his resolve. He spends the evening researching harmless ways to keep cats away, natural repellents, ultrasonic devices, and particular plants. The following day, George hurries back, only to find the cat sitting calmly by the grave, unbothered. The deterrents have failed. Though it resists further removal, the cat's attention suddenly shifts. It begins pawing gently at the soil near the headstone. George watches, puzzled. The cat's behavior has changed. It's not just guarding anymore. It's searching. Trying to block the cat's return to the grave, George sees its distress grow. It cries loudly and circles back, determined. The scene deeply unsettles him. The cat's persistent digging convinces George something more lies beneath. This isn't random behavior. It's purposeful. A connection exists between the animal and whatever is buried there. Feeling uneasy but resolved, George decides to seek help. Not just animal experts, maybe someone who knows the cemetery's history. He must get answers. Heading back to the maintenance shed, George grabs his phone and dials. The cat watches him leave, eyes locked on his every move. He senses its urgency. As George dials the number, he glances back at the grave and the steadfast cat. This odd guardianship has turned his daily routine upside down, but it's also ignited a curiosity he can't ignore. Whatever lies beneath, whatever story is waiting to be told. George is on the brink of uncovering it, and as he waits for the call to connect, he knows this is just the beginning. Feeling a mix of frustration and hope, George dials the police station once more. This time, he emphasizes the cat's odd persistence and behavior around the grave. "It's just not normal," he insists, trying to convey the urgency and weirdness of the situation. The operator pauses, then finally relents, agreeing to send a patrol to take a look. George hangs up, feeling a slight relief but still anxious. Reluctantly, the police agree to check out the situation. When they arrive, George leads them to the grave, pointing out the cat that refuses to leave. The officers observe as it remains unfazed by their presence, sitting stoically with unwavering attention. Exchanging puzzled glances, the officers admit the behavior is unusual. One of them, Officer Reynolds, decides to investigate further. He instructs Officer Scott to examine the grave more closely. As Scott inspects the area, he notes the soil looks disturbed compared to the surrounding ground. It seems recently unsettled, possibly a sign of activity. Reynolds, sensing something deeper, radios for additional support. George, watching intently, feels a mix of apprehension and hope as the officers discuss their findings. The graveyard, once quiet, now feels like a place where something hidden is about to be revealed. The cat continues its silent vigil, unfazed. Reynolds suggests a more thorough examination may be needed. The officers gather around the grave, debating whether to excavate. George stands by, tense as they consider their next steps. Soon after, Reynolds returns with Brutus, a K9 unit. The atmosphere grows heavy with anticipation. George wonders how the cat will react. Surprisingly, the cat remains still. Brutus slowly approaches, and rather than show hostility, the two animals regard each other with curiosity. Then Brutus starts pawing at the grave, mimicking the cat's earlier actions. Reynolds watches in surprise while the cat stays alert, as if approving. George shivers. This isn't ordinary behavior. Scott confirms the soil looks disrupted, more so than he initially thought. Their suspicions now rest on solid ground. Something, or someone, has disturbed the grave. Reynolds calls in for more resources. Between Brutus's reaction, the cat's unwavering presence, and the disturbed earth, there's no denying that something lies beneath the surface. As additional officers arrive, George observes in silence. The mystery has grown beyond him. The cat remains beside the grave, still watchful. It's no longer seen as a stray, it's central to whatever truth lies hidden. George recalls a storm that once knocked over a tree, disturbing the very grave. The roots disrupted the soil, requiring urgent repairs. He explains how a company was hired to restore the damage. Though the work seemed thorough, George now wonders if something had been shifted or concealed during restoration. His account adds another piece to the puzzle. Nature may have played a role in revealing what was buried, or perhaps hiding it. As the sun sets, Officer Reynolds nods at George, promising they'll uncover the truth. Shadows stretch over the cemetery. The mystery has captured them all. George watches, ready for whatever comes next. Officer Reynolds, piecing together George's account with what they've seen, grows wary of the restoration company's role. The timing of their involvement feels suspicious. Could they have hidden something? He resolves to investigate them further. At the same time, the team agrees. It's time to excavate the grave again. Backed by George and his officers, Reynolds prepares for a dig that may finally expose the truth. The soil, disturbed and inconsistent, now feels like more than just storm damage. As shovels cut into the earth, the atmosphere grows heavy with tension. George, standing nearby, watches in silence. Even the cat remains motionless, eyes fixed on the grave. With each layer removed, the anticipation thickens. Brutus and the cat hover nearby, both unusually focused. Suddenly, the shovel strikes something solid, a metallic edge, half buried. The team uncovers the object further. It's a sealed metal box, hidden deliberately. George leans in, heart pounding. The cat creeps closer, gaze unwavering. Brutus is brought forward. He sniffs the box, reacting with the same quiet intensity the cat showed. It's clear both animals recognize something important. As the box is carefully lifted, Officer Scott arrives with disturbing news. The restoration company had only existed briefly, formed before the storm and dissolved soon after completing their work at the cemetery. The timing is too precise to ignore. The implications are alarming. It now seems the grave was chosen intentionally, not for who was buried there, but for what it could hide. The officers realize they may be dealing with a planned cover-up. With the box secured as evidence, Reynolds and Scott transport it back to the station. George stays behind, watching the grave slowly return to its former stillness. The cat doesn't follow. Instead, it curls beside the grave, as if its duty isn't yet complete. At the forensic lab, the sealed box is opened under careful supervision. Inside, officers discover illegal substances and a firearm. The contents had clearly been stashed with great effort, deep enough to avoid casual discovery, yet close enough for someone to retrieve later. The discovery sends shockwaves through the department. The firearm is quickly matched to a cold case from years ago, a key piece of missing evidence that had stalled the investigation. DNA on the items inside confirms a link to the original suspect. The breakthrough is immediate. Within hours, the suspect is located and arrested. With the case reopened, details begin to fall into place. The restoration company had likely been a front to bury the evidence, taking advantage of the chaos caused by the storm. The choice of grave was strategic, quiet, overlooked, and unlikely to be disturbed. Back at the cemetery, George is informed of the outcome. The strange behavior of the cat, the disturbed soil, the concealed box, it had all led to this moment. Justice, long delayed, was finally served. Officer Reynolds makes a personal decision. Recognizing the cat's pivotal role, he chooses to adopt it. Alongside Brutus, the cat becomes an honorary member of the department, a quiet symbol of persistence, instinct, and unlikely partnership. The cemetery returns to peace. The mystery that once lingered in silence now stands resolved, thanks to an observant caretaker, a loyal dog, and a cat who refused to leave.